want to start with tariffs. Another day, another set of letters from President Trump to various countries making threats of new tariff rates, as we saw there. Late last night, Trump also formally announced a 50% tariff on copper imports. I know you've been covering this issue closely, and I wonder if you could just take us inside the president's head on all of this. What is he hoping will happen in the big picture? What is the White House's strategy?
The biggest thing I think to think about here is how the president really views tariffs as leverage and how he views them as one related to trade and protecting domestic industry, but he also views it as a cudgel to get his way with foreign governments. If you remember, this whole reciprocal tariff battle started because of his longstanding belief that the U.S. has been ripped off by other countries. Those are the words he's used, right, for decades. And so I think that's exactly what we're seeing here. But at the same time, we're seeing efforts as well to really go after copper, like you mentioned, go after pharmaceutical imports, auto tariffs, right? There's these sectoral based tariffs as well that are a little bit more industry focused. And then, as you just mentioned, the new tariffs on Brazil really aimed at exacting a political outcome in a foreign country. And so we're really seeing it here as this unprecedented leverage on a foreign government for the president to get his way.
Yeah, definitely unprecedented. And this new August 1st deadline, I mean, are you seeing that as a soft deadline? Are you expecting any big surprises leading up to that date?
So White House officials, maintain that's a firm deadline. That's what the president himself has said as well. And I'll tell you, talking to industry leaders, talking to foreign officials, talking to Trump allies outside the White House, they all are pretty convinced that that is a firm or fairly firm deadline for a couple of reasons. One, the president has, again, already extended this deadline once. These tariffs were supposed to take effect shortly after Liberation Day in April. They were bumped out 90 days. Now they've been bumped out this extra 3 weeks. A lot of folks see that as he's already pushed it out once. If you do it again, no one will really believe the tariffs will mean anything. So that's part of it. But two, there are, some of these deals with other countries that appear to be on the horizon, or at least some sort of mini deal seems possible in the coming weeks. You think of countries like India, trading partners like the EU. It may not be sort of this fully fledged quote unquote trade deal the way you would normally think about it. But a lot of folks think it's going to be possible to get something on paper with these countries in the coming weeks. And that the president is, his patience is kind of wearing thin, right? He doesn't want these negotiations to drag on forever. He wants some wins. And so I think the prevailing view that I'm hearing right now and the folks I'm talking to is that this is a fairly hard deadline, which is how the president himself has referred to it, right? He said it's firm, maybe not 100% firm, but pretty firm.
And pivoting to something else that's been a source of growing frustration for President Trump, and that is the war in Ukraine. He wants it to be over. He clearly doesn't think that Vladimir Putin is serious enough about getting there. And now there's a bipartisan Russia sanctions bill in the Senate that may have Trump's support. Is it your sense that the president is maybe turning a corner on this issue?
It really does feel that way. I mean, talking to folks inside the White House, the president really has been increasingly frustrated with Russia. I mean, that's been very clear, right, in his public rhetoric. And I think he's sort of butting up against the reality that he's not able to get his way that he wants with the Russian president. And so I think what we're seeing now is this legislation that's pending in Congress, and then the president's overall outward attitude, even this back and forth we've seen over the flow of weapons to Ukraine. Really, I think reflects this sort of, increased tension between the U.S. and Russia, and really just represents such a stark shift from where we were just a couple of months ago when, it was President Trump clashing with, Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky in the Oval Office. I just think of how far we've come, but he certainly is in a much more antagonistic position toward Russia at the current moment.
And Megan, I want to get your reaction to something Republican Senator Thom Tillis told Jake Tapper about the passage of the so-called Big Beautiful Bill. Here's what Tillis, who obviously opposed that legislation, says he told Donald Trump.
I told the president, if we don't get this right, then he's probably going to have two of the most miserable years of his life if the Democrats take the gavels in the House. And I'm trying to avoid that. I told the president, I really do believe it could be his Obamacare.
So what is the level of concern inside the White House about how much this bill could cost Republicans politically in the midterms?
I will say, White House officials are pretty bullish right now. For whatever concerns they may have over Medicaid, they seem pretty confident in the messaging strategy they have around it, around this idea that they're going to frame these Medicaid cuts as waste, fraud, and abuse. So not hearing a lot of concern at this point. On the other hand, the White House knows that this is an extremely challenging and difficult midterm. If anything, though, I think the White House is actually feeling optimistic about the timeline under which the so-called Big Beautiful Bill was passed, because of the tax cuts contained in it, because of the fact that for instance cuts the no taxes on tips and no taxes on Social Security. Those provisions will take effect before the midterm elections. People will actually go to file their taxes and be able to sort of see those numbers in their tax forms when they file next April. And that was a really important provision for the White House. And so I think they're feeling a lot of optimism right now. Of course, things are only going to escalate and get more challenging from here on out. But I think, in sum, they're feeling pretty optimistic about the chances of the bill helping them in the midterm elections.